The night before their flight, my mother shoved a $9,000 invoice into my hands and said, "You'll pay. It's your duty as a daughter." I refused. My father's hand swung across my face in front of our relatives. 5 minutes later, I dialed 911, but instead of begging for help, I quietly opened the digital vault of evidence I'd been collecting for 10 years, files they never knew existed. The next morning at the airport, everything exploded. My name is Rachel Monroe, and at 35, I'd built a life my parents couldn't touch, or so I thought. As a financial manager at Northlake Dynamics, a supply chain tech company in Cleveland, I spent my days analyzing risk assessments and budget forecasts. The irony wasn't lost on me that I could predict market volatility, but never saw my own family's financial manipulation coming until it was too late. The Sunday dinner started like any other at my parents' split-level house in Shaker Heights. The smell of bleach from my mother Lorraine's obsessive kitchen cleaning mixed with pot roast. Howard, my father, sat at the head of the table, his church elder pin catching the overhead light. They'd invited my younger brother Kyle, who showed up late in the BMW they'd co-signed for, another debt I'd warned him about. "We have wonderful news," Lorraine announced, sliding a printed reservation across the table. "The whole family is going to the Bahamas next month. 7 nights at the Coral Reef Resort." The paper showed a luxury beachfront suite, multiple excursions, first-class flights. My stomach tightened as I calculated the cost before she even said it. $9,000, Howard said, his tone matter of fact. "Your portion, my portion." I set down my fork, the click of metal on ceramic sharp in the sudden silence. "For the trip." Lorraine's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We've already booked everything. You're paying for it. Of course. It's the least you can do after everything we've done for you." The least I could do. The phrase triggered a cascade of memories I'd learned to compress into a mental file folder. The time they'd borrowed my credit card for groceries and charged a flat-screen TV. The car loan for Kyle where they'd forged my signature as cosigner. I'd discovered it only when the missed payment notifications started hitting my credit report. The college fund they'd drained while I was at Ohio State, claiming unexpected medical expenses that turned out to be a kitchen renovation. "I'm not paying for your vacation," I said quietly. Howard's face darkened, that familiar flush creeping up from his collar. "We raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head for 18 years. And I've been paying you back ever since." I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the spreadsheet I'd started keeping 3 years ago. $4,000 for Kyle's car payments, $6,000 in emergency loans never repaid. The $700 you charged to my Nordstrom card last Christmas. "Don't you dare keep track like we're strangers," Lorraine hissed. "Family doesn't keep receipts." But I did. Every text message asking for money, every guilt trip voicemail, every unauthorized charge. They lived in a password-protected folder labeled Monroe Archive, 10 years of documentation they didn't know existed. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, eyes down. He'd learned long ago to stay silent during these confrontations, to let me absorb the impact while he slipped away clean. "The reservation is non-refundable," Howard said, his voice dropping to that dangerous register I remembered from childhood. "Tuesday at Grace Hollow's fundraiser. We'll discuss this properly." Grace Hollow Baptist Church, where my parents had cultivated their image as devoted pillars of the community for 2 decades, where Howard served as elder and Lorraine ran the women's ministry, where appearances mattered more than truth. I stood, leaving my dinner untouched. The kitchen bleach smell followed me to the door, mixing with the sound of Lorraine's voice. "You owe us, Rachel. Don't forget that." As I drove home to my apartment in Ohio City, I noticed my hands weren't shaking anymore. After years of their financial manipulation disguised as parental right, something had finally shifted. I pulled into my parking spot and sat in the dark car for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. They wanted $9,000 for a vacation I hadn't agreed to, wouldn't attend, and certainly wouldn't fund. But more than that, they wanted submission. They wanted me to click my pen and sign whatever they put in front of me, the way I had at 22, 25, even 30. I unlocked my phone and opened the Monroe archive folder. 10 years of evidence, bank statements, text messages, photos of bruises from the times their demands had turned physical, back when I still lived at home. They thought Tuesday's fundraiser, surrounded by their church community, would give them leverage. They had no idea what I'd been building in silence. The Grace Hollow Baptist Church fundraiser occupied the entire back lawn, white tents glowing under string lights as Tuesday evening settled over Cleveland. I arrived at 6:30, watching my parents work the crowd in their element, Howard glad-handing the deacons, Lorraine air-kissing the ministry wives. The smell of grilled meat mixed with that peculiar church event bleach scent from the folding tables. They'd orchestrated this perfectly. Public setting. Witnesses they controlled. The extended family clustered near the dessert table. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Ron, cousins who still believed the Monroe family narrative of successful, God-fearing parents and their ungrateful daughter. Rachel. Lorraine's voice carried across the lawn. Syrup sweet for the audience. Come say hello to Pastor Daniel. So, I walked over, noting how they'd positioned themselves strategically, backs to the church wall, crowd hemming me in. Pastor Daniel, silver-haired and soft-spoken, smiled warmly, unaware he was being used as a prop. Your parents were just telling me about the family vacation, he said. How wonderful that you're all going together. Actually, I started. Rachel's being difficult about the finances. Howard interrupted, his tone suggesting playful exasperation while his eyes promised consequences. You know how modern kids are about family obligations. It's $9,000, I said clearly, letting my voice carry. For a vacation I didn't agree to. The conversations around us stuttered. Lorraine's hand found my wrist, her manicured nails digging in as she laughed. Such a kidder. Rachel's always been our little accountant, counting every penny. Let go, I said quietly. Her grip tightened. Don't make a scene. I said let go. You ungrateful. I pulled my arm back sharply, and that's when Howard struck. Not a closed fist, he was too smart for that in public, but an open-handed slap that snapped my head sideways. The crack echoed across the suddenly silent lawn. You will not disrespect your mother, he said, voice trembling with rage. My cheek burned, eye-watering, but I didn't raise my hand to touch it. Instead, I looked directly at Pastor Daniel, whose face had gone pale. Are you seeing this, Howard? The pastor started. Perhaps we should. She owes us. Lorraine shrieked, mask finally slipping. 25 years of sacrifice, and she won't even help with one family vacation. Aunt Patricia stepped forward. Rachel, honey, just pay them. It's what daughters do. Filipino families understand duty, Uncle Ron added. Though we weren't Filipino, weren't Asian at all. Just a white Midwestern family with delusions of cultural traditions that justified their abuse. I'm calling the police, I said, pulling out my phone. You wouldn't dare. Howard growled, but I was already dialing. As I spoke to the dispatcher, giving the church address, I watched my relatives' faces shift from smugness to uncertainty. Only when I said physical assault did Lorraine release my wrist completely, leaving crescent moon indentations from her nails. The crowd dispersed like smoke, nobody wanting to be interviewed when the patrol car arrived 15 minutes later. The officer, a young black woman named Rodriguez, took my statement while my parents stood 20 feet away, Lorraine crying dramatically for anyone still watching. Do you want to press charges? Officer Rodriguez asked, photographing my face where Howard's handprint still glowed red. Not yet, I said, loud enough for them to hear. But I want this documented. She nodded, understanding. We'll file the report. You can decide later. Pastor Daniel approached as the officer left, wringing his hands. Rachel, I'm sure we can resolve this within the church family. Mediation, counseling. With respect, Pastor, this isn't a spiritual problem. It's assault and attempted extortion. Your parents are good people who've given so much to this congregation. Their generosity comes from money they've stolen from me over the years." I pulled up my phone's camera roll, showing him screenshot after screenshot. "Would you like to see the receipts?" He backed away, shaking his head. I can't get involved in family finances. But he'd been perfectly willing to get involved when he thought I was the problem. I walked to my car, past the parking lot's security camera that had captured everything. My cheek throbbed as I sat in the driver's seat, but I didn't ice it yet. First, I took selfies from multiple angles, then uploaded everything to 3 different cloud services. A text from Kyle. "Are you okay?" I didn't respond. He'd watched from the crowd, silent as always. Another from Lorraine. "You've embarrassed us for the last time. You will pay for this trip, or everyone will know what kind of daughter you really are." I screenshotted that too, adding it to the Monroe archive. Then I drove home, where I carefully peeled off my church clothes and examined the bruising in my bathroom mirror. The handprint was darkening nicely. The nail marks on my wrist had drawn tiny beads of blood. I opened my laptop and began typing names into search bars: domestic violence resources, financial abuse lawyers, temporary protective orders. The church fundraiser lights twinkled in photos already appearing on social media, everyone pretending they hadn't witnessed what happened. But I had Officer Rodriguez's business card. I had the security footage timestamp. I had 10 years of evidence, and now, finally, I had public witnesses to their violence. They wanted their $9,000 by Friday's flight. They were going to get something else entirely. Wednesday morning at 7:45, I sat in the Cuyahoga Domestic Violence Resource Center with a manila folder that contained 10 years of my life. The advocate, a woman named Denise with kind eyes and efficient hands, spread my documents across her desk like evidence in a crime scene, which, I supposed, they were. "Financial abuse is abuse," she said, studying the bank statements I'd highlighted. "This pattern of unauthorized charges, the escalation to physical violence when you refused demands, textbook coercion." I'd spent the previous night pulling 24 months of statements, discovering the full scope of what my mother had done with the supplemental card I'd foolishly given her 2 years ago. "For emergencies," she'd promised. "Just for groceries when my check is late." The transactions told a different story. Salon appointments, online shopping sprees, restaurant charges always conveniently just under the amount that would trigger a notification. $15,000 over 2 years. Small enough increments that I'd missed the pattern while juggling work and life. "This Venmo history," Denise pointed to my phone screen. "Your mother requested money 43 times in the past year." "Family expenses," I said, mimicking Lorraine's tone. "Internet bills, Dad's medication, grocery runs, never with receipts, always with guilt. And these texts from your father." I scrolled through Howard's messages, each one a masterclass in manipulation. "You owe us. After everything we've done. Ungrateful daughter. You'll pay one way or another." Denise photographed everything, her scanner humming as she created official copies. "We can file for a temporary protection order today. Given the documented assault and these threats, you have grounds." While she prepared the paperwork, I opened my laptop and created the timeline I should have made years ago. Every incident, dated and detailed. The Christmas they emptied my savings account for Kyle's appendix surgery that turned out to be elective cosmetic dentistry. The time Howard slapped me at 19 for refusing to co-sign their home equity loan. The 100 small violences that preceded Tuesday's public explosion. "One more thing," I said, pulling up my email. "I want to document this with my pastor before my parents spin the narrative." I composed the message carefully, CCing the church board. "Pastor Daniel, following last night's assault at the church fundraiser, I'm documenting the pattern of financial and physical abuse I've endured from my parents. I'm pursuing legal protection and wanted you to have the facts before Howard and Lorraine attempt to manipulate the congregation's sympathy. Attached is the police report from Tuesday's incident. I'm not seeking church intervention, merely transparency." Click, send, By noon, I sat in the courthouse filing room, watching a clerk stamp my TPO application. The order would be temporary. A judge would review it within 48 hours, but it would be served immediately. They'll be notified by law enforcement, the clerk explained. Once served, they cannot contact you directly or through third parties. No calls, texts, emails, or physical proximity. I thought about Friday's flight, now 36 hours away. Perfect timing. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't read, but I could see the sender names piling up. Aunt Patricia, Uncle Ron, numbers I recognized as church members. The narrative war had begun, but I wasn't fighting it on their battlefield anymore. Instead, I drove to First National Bank's fraud department. The representative, Marcus, pulled up my account while I explained the unauthorized charges. The supplemental card was supposed to be for emergencies only, I said, sliding him my documentation. As you can see, these charges don't match that agreement. Marcus's eyebrows rose as he scrolled through the transactions. Ma'am, we can freeze the card immediately and investigate these charges. Given the police report you filed, this could be considered identity theft and fraud. Do it, I said. The click of his keyboard felt like ammunition loading. Every keystroke was a bullet in the chamber of my response. Lorraine's access to my money, gone. The investigation would generate its own paper trail, bank records that couldn't be dismissed as family drama. I spent the afternoon at Legal Aid, where a lawyer named Elise Carver reviewed my case pro bono, sharp-faced and unsentimental. She reminded me of myself on my better days. Cease and desist letter first, she said, fingers flying over her keyboard. It creates a legal record of their harassment. If they violate it, we escalate to a restraining order and civil suit. They're supposed to fly to the Bahamas on Friday, I said. She smiled, the expression all teeth. How interesting. Financial crimes affecting interstate commerce can trigger federal jurisdiction if they used any of the stolen funds for those tickets. We drafted the letter together, each word precise as a scalpel. It would be delivered Thursday morning, giving them just enough time to panic before their flight. That evening, I sat in my apartment reviewing what I'd built in a single day. Protection order filed. Bank investigating fraud. Cease and desist prepared. Church notified. Everything documented. Time-stamped. Official. My phone showed 17 missed calls from my parents, 12 from various relatives, and 1 from Kyle. They're losing their minds. Dad's talking about coming to your apartment. Why? I forwarded the threat to Officer Rodriguez and Elise, then activated my doorbell camera's motion recording. If Howard showed up, he'd be violating the TPO before it was even served. The archive folder on my laptop had grown to 68 documents, 10 years of evidence, but the last 24 hours had generated the most powerful ammunition. They'd given me what I'd never had before: witnesses, violence in public, threats in writing. I pulled up the Coral Reef Resort reservation they'd forwarded weeks ago, studying the details. 7 nights, first-class flights, premium suite, paid with a deposit from a credit card I didn't recognize, which meant they'd likely taken another loan or opened another fraudulent account. The final charge was due at check-in. $9,000 they assumed I'd hand over when faced with public shame at the airport. They had no idea what was waiting for them at Terminal B. Thursday morning at 8:15, the doorbell camera alert hit my phone. Howard stood on my apartment building's stoop, holding a document that looked official from a distance but was probably drafted at their kitchen table. Behind him, Lorraine clutched her purse like a weapon. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched through the app as they rang again, then began pounding. Rachel Monroe. Howard shouted at the door. You will respect your family obligations. My neighbor, Mrs. Chin, no relation. Despite the name, poked her head out. Should I call the police? We are her parents. Lorraine shrieked. We have every right to speak to our daughter. I texted Mrs. Chin. Yes, please call. They're violating a protection order. The recording captured everything: Howard kicking my door, Lorraine screaming about ungrateful children, the arrival of 2 officers who served them with the TPO right there on my stoop. The shock on their faces when the papers appeared was almost worth the years of abuse. You can't come within 500 feet of Ms. Monroe, the officer explained. No contact through any means, including third parties. This is ridiculous, Howard sputtered. Over a family vacation. Sir, it's over documented assault and harassment. Leave now, or we'll arrest you. They left, but not before Lorraine shouted, You'll pay for this. The officer looked at his partner. Did she just threaten the victim while being served a protection order? I saved that recording to 3 different clouds. An hour later, Elise called. They've escalated. I just received what they're calling a family contract from someone claiming to be their lawyer. Uncle Jeffrey, I said. He got his law degree online. Mostly does tax prep. Well, he's demanding $9,000 plus what they're calling a dishonor fee of $3,000 for public humiliation and defamation of character. I laughed. Actually laughed. They're trying to bill me for their own violence. It gets better. They're threatening to contact Northlake Dynamics about your mental instability and financial irresponsibility. Forward it all to me, I said, already composing an email to my company's HR department with a preemptive disclosure of the situation, attaching the police report and protection order. By noon, the family assault began in earnest. Kyle texted that our parents had called an emergency family meeting at Aunt Patricia's house, drafting a letter about my breakdown to send to my employer. Church members left voicemails about reconciliation and honoring thy mother and father. The coup de grace came at 3:47, an email from Pastor Daniel. Rachel, your parents have shared concerning information about your mental state and financial habits. They've shown me documentation of money you've borrowed and not repaid. The church board feels it would be appropriate for you to attend counseling with your parents to address these issues and the vacation payment you're withholding out of spite. Documentation. I knew exactly what they'd manufactured. Probably edited screenshots, fake promissory notes, creative accounting that reversed victim and perpetrator. But Pastor Daniel had made a crucial error. He'd put it in writing, making himself and the church potential co-conspirators in harassment. Elise was delighted when I forwarded it. They're building our case for us. Keep everything. That evening, my parents made their final strategic error. Lorraine, using a prepaid phone to circumvent the protection order, left a voicemail. You think you're so smart with your lawyers and police. We know about the money you've been hiding from your taxes. We know about the overtime fraud at your company. We have evidence. Pay for the vacation, or we'll destroy you. You have until tomorrow morning. Completely fabricated threats, but they'd crossed into criminal extortion territory. I forwarded the voicemail to Officer Rodriguez, Elise, and added it to my FBI IC3 complaint for good measure. The best part, I'd never committed tax fraud or overtime violations. My finances were cleaner than church crystal because I'd learned early to document everything, knowing this day would come. Their threats were empty, but the act of making them was a felony. I opened my laptop and began organizing everything for tomorrow. The protection order violation from this morning, the extortion attempt tonight, the fraud investigation from the bank, which had already flagged suspicious activity on their preliminary review, Uncle Jeffrey's illegal practice of law without proper licensing, the church's participation in harassment despite being notified of a protection order. Then I did something I'd been avoiding for 10 years. I opened the oldest folder in my archive, the photos from when I was 17, the bruises from when I'd refused to give them my college savings, the medical records from the ER visit they'd convinced me to lie about, the teacher's reports they'd threatened me to recant. Statute of limitations had passed for prosecution, but not for civil suits, not for establishing a pattern, not for showing a judge exactly who Howard and Lorraine Monroe really were. I compiled it all into a single PDF, Monroe versus Monroe evidence of long-term abuse, fraud, and extortion. 137 pages of receipts, literally and figuratively. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Jeffrey Monroe, attorney at law. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to wire the funds, or we'll proceed with contacting your employer, the IRS, and local news about your treatment of your elderly parents. Elderly. Howard was 58, Lorraine 56, and they played tennis 3 times a week. I screenshotted it, adding it to page 138. Tomorrow was Friday. Flight day. They thought they'd corner me at the airport, force my hand in public, use shame as their final weapon. They had no idea I'd already contacted TSA, airport security, and Cleveland police with notice of potential protection order violations at Hopkins International, badge numbers, case references, everything logged and confirmed. The trap wasn't being set for me. It was already set for them. The thread that unraveled everything started with a simple Venmo transaction. While reviewing the family meeting notes Kyle had reluctantly shared, guilty conscience. Finally, I noticed something odd. Aunt Patricia had mentioned the church's generous support for my parents' vacation, praising their ministry work in the Bahamas. Ministry work at a luxury resort. I pulled up the Grace Hollow Baptist website, navigating to their financial transparency page. Churches had to file certain documents, and Grace Hollow proudly posted their community fund allocations. There it was. Monroe Caribbean Ministry Outreach, $4,500. My parents had taken money from the church's community fund for their vacation. I cross-referenced the dates with Lorraine's Venmo history. 3 days after the church allocation, she'd received $4,500 from GH Community Trees with the note Ministry Supplies. The same day, a payment went out to Coral Reef Resort for exactly that amount. The trail got worse. Pulling up Howard's Facebook, he'd never learned proper privacy settings, I found posts bragging about spreading the gospel in the Caribbean, complete with photos from previous vacations he'd retroactively labeled as mission trips. 3 years of this. 3 years of church funds mysteriously aligned with their vacation dates. I called Elise immediately. They've been embezzling from Grace Hollow. Send me everything. Now. While uploading the files, I received an unexpected ally. Marcus from First National's fraud department called with an update. Ms. Monroe, our investigation has uncovered something concerning. The credit card used for the Bahamas deposit. It was opened using your social security number, but with your parents' address? This is identity theft. When was it opened? 6 weeks ago, right after you declined to pay for their trip the first time. According to your timeline, they'd committed fraud to book the vacation, assuming they'd force me to pay before the bill came due. The paper trail was damning. Application signatures that didn't match mine. Security questions answered with information only they would know. A spending pattern that aligned with their habits, not mine. The church board meeting was that evening. I wasn't invited, but Denise from the Domestic Violence Center had a contact on the board, Margaret Williams, who'd quietly questioned the Monroes' financial requests before. Margaret called me at 7:30. Rachel, you need to know what happened. Tell me. Your parents presented their case first. Doctored emails, fake receipts, a whole presentation about your mental breakdown. Then our treasurer, Richard, asked to review the community fund allocations. Your father went white. And Richard found the discrepancies, not just this year, going back 3 years, almost $15,000 in ministry expenses that coincide with vacation charges. The room erupted. I could picture it, Howard's careful facade cracking, Lorraine's tears shifting from manipulation to genuine panic. Your mother tried to claim it was a misunderstanding. Margaret continued. Said they were doing ministry work during the trips. But when pressed for documentation, photos, contacts, anything proving ministry activity, they had nothing. Then your father made it worse. How? He threatened to withdraw their tithing, to take half the congregation with them if the board pursued this. Essentially admitted guilt while trying to extort the church into silence. Please tell me someone recorded that. The meeting minutes reflect everything. The board voted unanimously to demand full restitution within 30 days and to ban them from any financial positions. Pastor Daniel looked sick when he realized he'd been defending fraudsters. I pulled up my laptop, adding this development to my master file. The Monroe family reputation, built over 20 years of performance Christianity, had crumbled in a single evening. Kyle texted at 9. Mom and Dad are destroying the house, throwing things. Dad says you've ruined them. I texted back, They ruined themselves. I just kept receipts. The whole church knows. Everyone's calling them thieves. They are thieves. They're still going to the airport tomorrow. They think if they confront you publicly, you'll cave. Of course they did. Even exposed as embezzlers, they couldn't imagine I'd maintain boundaries. They'd trained me from birth to fold under public pressure, to prioritize their reputation over my well-being. Kyle, I typed, you should distance yourself from them. This is going to get worse. I can't. I'm on Mom's credit cards. Dad co-signed my car. I'm trapped. For the first time in years, I felt sympathy for my brother. He'd been their golden child, but that came with golden chains. After tomorrow. Come see me. We'll figure out your situation. What happens tomorrow? Justice. I spent the rest of the evening coordinating with my team. Yes, I had a team now. Elise for legal matters, Officer Rodriguez for criminal charges, Marcus for fraud investigation, Richard from the church for embezzlement documentation. Even Margaret had offered to be a witness. The flight was at 8:45 a.m. They'd have to check in by 7:45 at the latest. I pulled up the airport website, checking the terminal layout. Gate B6 Terminal B. Security Checkpoint B was the only way through. I made one final preparation, logging into the federal court system to file a civil suit for fraud, identity theft, emotional distress, and defamation. The filing would be timestamped at 8 a.m. tomorrow, right when they'd be trying to check in. My phone rang. Unknown number. Rachel Monroe. A professional female voice. Yes. This is Special Agent Chen. Sorry. Special Agent Torres from the FBI's Cleveland office. We received your IC3 complaint about extortion and identity theft crossing state lines. Can we meet tomorrow morning? I'll be at Hopkins International Airport, Terminal B, around 7:30 a.m. Interesting timing. We'll have agents there. The final piece clicked into place. Federal agents, state protection order, bank fraud investigation, church embezzlement, all converging at Terminal B tomorrow morning. I looked at the Coral Reef Resort confirmation email one more time. Monroe Family Paradise Getaway. Paradise was about to become purgatory. Thursday night at 11:43 p.m. Lorraine stood on my doorstep again. Alone this time. The doorbell camera captured her perfectly. Disheveled hair, smeared mascara, clutching a manila envelope. She knew about the protection order but rang anyway. Desperation overriding sense. Rachel, please, she said to the camera, knowing I was watching through the app. I just need $2,500, not even the full amount. Just enough to save face. The church already knows, but if we can't go on this trip, everyone will know we're broke. I didn't respond, but I kept recording. I know you're listening. Her voice cracked. I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything, $2,500, and I'll never ask for anything again? The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. She'd been saying never again for 15 years. I have something of yours, she continued, pulling papers from the envelope. Your birth certificate, your Social Security card, that savings bond from Grandma Rose. You want these, pay me? Holding my legal documents hostage, I screenshot the video and forwarded it to Officer Rodriguez with the caption, Violation of Protection Order and Attempted Extortion, 11:43 p.m. Lorraine waited another 10 minutes, alternating between tears and threats, before finally screaming, You've destroyed this family! She threw the envelope at my door and stormed off. I waited until her car disappeared before retrieving the envelope. Empty. Of course. The documents were probably in her purse. Bait she'd never intended to surrender. My phone buzzed. Kyle. Mom's losing it. She just told Dad she's taking money from the church safe tomorrow morning. Says she has the key from when she was treasurer. I called Elise immediately. We need to alert the church. On it. This is conspiracy to commit felony theft now. While Elise handled that, I pulled out my laptop and began uploading everything to multiple cloud services. The protection order violations from today, the doorbell footage, the extortion attempts, 10 years of evidence, but the last 48 hours had provided more ammunition than the previous decade combined. At 2:30 a.m., I was still awake, organizing files when my laptop dinged with an email from Howard. He'd used his work account, probably thinking it looked more official. "Rachel, this is your final notice. Your mother and I have consulted with our attorney and are prepared to file charges against you for elder abuse, defamation, theft of family funds, and emotional distress. We have evidence of your mental instability, including your history of counseling and college attached. Pay the $9,000 by 7 a.m., or we proceed with criminal charges and public exposure of your psychological issues." The attachment was my counseling record from Ohio State, when I'd sought help dealing with their abuse. Somehow, they'd obtained confidential medical records, another federal crime to add to their collection. I forwarded it to Special Agent Torres, Elise, and Officer Rodriguez, then opened the recording app on my phone. If they came again tonight, I'd be ready. But they didn't come. Instead, at 4:15 a.m., I received a call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then listened. "Rachel Monroe, this is Richard Hutchinson from Grace Hollow. I'm at the church with Pastor Daniel and 2 police officers. Your mother was just caught trying to access the safe. She had a key we didn't know she'd copied. We've detained her until police arrive." "Thought you should know." The recording continued with background noise. Lorraine screaming about persecution, about ungrateful daughters, about how the money was rightfully theirs for all their years of service. I saved that voicemail to 3 different drives. By 5 a.m., I was dressed and ready. Black blazer, professional but severe. The bruise on my cheek had deepened to purple-green, dramatic under the apartment's LED lights. I didn't cover it with makeup. Let everyone see. My phone showed 17 missed calls from Howard, 12 from various relatives, and 1 from Lorraine's phone. Probably Howard using it after hers was confiscated at the church. I opened my recording app and set it to automatically save to the cloud every 5 minutes. Then I activated my backup phone, also recording, tucked in my jacket pocket. 2 devices, multiple cloud saves, everything time-stamped and GPS tagged. At 5:45, I drove to Hopkins International. The sunrise painted Cleveland's skyline orange and pink, almost beautiful enough to forget what was coming. Almost. I parked in the short-term lot and walked to Terminal B. The airport was already busy with early morning travelers, the sound of rolling suitcases and departure announcements filling the space. The smell of coffee and industrial disinfectant mixed in the recycled air. At 6:15, I positioned myself at a small table near the security checkpoint. Clear view of the check-in counters. I opened my laptop, pulled up the master file labeled Monroe Final Strike, and began my last review. Protection order active and violated multiple times. FBI investigation initiated. Bank fraud case, documented and reported. Church embezzlement exposed and reported to police. Identity theft confirmed by First National Bank. Civil suit filed at 8 a.m. Recording devices, active and cloud connected. At 6:30, I spotted Officer Rodriguez in plain clothes, coffee in hand, casually reading a newspaper near the American Airlines counter. A few yards away, 2 people in suits who screamed, "Federal agents," pretended to check their phones. At 6:42, Richard from Grace Hollow arrived with Pastor Daniel and a police officer. They positioned themselves near the terminal entrance, Richard holding a folder that probably contained the embezzlement evidence. At 6:51, Kyle texted, "They're in the car. Dad's driving like a maniac. Mom's on the phone with Uncle Jeffrey, trying to get him to meet them at the airport with cash." I replied, "Tell Uncle Jeffrey that practicing law without a license in Ohio is a felony. Might want to skip this one." At 6:58, I saw them through the terminal's glass doors. Howard striding purposefully, pulling 2 massive suitcases. Lorraine scrambling behind him, designer sunglasses failing to hide her swollen eyes. They looked like what they were, desperate criminals about to lose everything. 7 a.m. arrived with the automated announcement for the Bahamas flight beginning check-in. The trap was set, every piece in position. 10 years of suffering about to crystallize into one perfect moment of justice. They pushed through the revolving door, and I clicked the record button one final time. 7:05 a.m. Howard and Lorraine approached the check-in counter, their movements sharp with manufactured confidence. I watched from my position as Lorraine pulled out her credit card, the fraudulent one opened in my name. The check-in agent smiled, began typing, then frowned. "Ma'am, this card has been flagged. Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible!" Lorraine snapped, loud enough to draw attention. "Try it again." The agent tried twice more. "I'm sorry, but the charge won't process. The total due is $9,000. Would you like to use a different card?" Howard's face flushed that familiar purple. "Where is she?" He spun around, scanning the terminal until his eyes locked on mine. "There, our daughter has the money." They abandoned their luggage at the counter, storming toward me. I stayed seated, fingers steady on my laptop keyboard, recording everything. "You will pay for this trip," Howard growled, now 20 feet away and closing. Officer Rodriguez materialized between us. "Sir, you're violating a protection order. Step back." "I don't care about your piece of paper." Howard tried to push past, but Rodriguez held firm. That's when the first domino fell. Special Agent Torres approached, badge visible. "Mr. Monroe, we need to discuss the fraudulent credit card opened in your daughter's name." "I don't know what you're talking about." Lorraine shrieked, but her voice cracked. The check-in agent called out, "The system shows this card was reported for fraud yesterday." "I'll need to hold it and call security." "This is insane," Howard yelled. "Rachel, stop this nonsense and pay for our trip." Richard from Grace Hollow stepped forward with Pastor Daniel. "Howard, we also need to discuss the $15,000 missing from the church community fund." The terminal seemed to freeze. Travelers stopped to stare. Someone was definitely filming with their phone. "You called them," Lorraine turned on me, mascara streaming. "Your own parents." "No," I said calmly. "You called them when you embezzled their money. I just kept the receipts." Pastor Daniel held up his folder. "We have 3 years of fraudulent ministry expenses. The police have been notified." A uniformed airport officer arrived, responding to the check-in agent's call. "Ma'am, sir, please come with me regarding the fraudulent payment attempt." "Wait." Uncle Jeffrey appeared, breathless and sweating, clutching a wrinkled check. "I have money." $2,000 to cover." Jeffrey Monroe. Agent Torres interrupted. "We'll need to speak with you about practicing law without a proper license and participating in extortion." Jeffrey's face went white. He backed away, but another agent blocked his path. The gate announcement echoed overhead. "Flight 417 to Nassau, Bahamas, now boarding Group A." "Our flight." Lorraine lunged toward me, but Rodriguez caught her arm. "You've ruined everything 25 years I raised you, and this is how you repay us." "You raised me." I stood slowly, pulling out my phone. "Should I play the recording from last night when you tried to steal from the church safe, or the one where you admitted to taking my Social Security card?" Howard made one last desperate move, reaching for my laptop. The moment his hand touched my shoulder, a clear violation of the protection order with multiple witnesses, the handcuffs appeared. "Howard Monroe, you're under arrest for violation of a protection order and assault," Rodriguez announced, the click of the cuffs sharp in the sudden silence. "No," Lorraine screamed. "We're going to miss our flight. The Bahamas, our anniversary trip, your embezzlement trip," Richard corrected, holding up bank statements. "Paid for with church funds meant for actual charity." The check-in agent called out again. "Final boarding call for Flight 417 to Nassau." I watched my parents' dream vacation board without them. Through the terminal windows, the plane pushed back from the gate at 7:42 a.m., their empty seats a $9,000 monument to their greed. The FBI agents led Uncle Jeffrey away for questioning. Pastor Daniel stood with Richard, both looking sick as they processed the full scope of the betrayal. Airport security held Lorraine as she sobbed about persecution and ungrateful children. Howard, in handcuffs, turned to me one last time. You've destroyed your family. No, I replied, handing Officer Rodriguez my USB drive of evidence. You destroyed it. I just documented the demolition. The TSA supervisor approached with forms about the security disturbance. As I signed, providing my statement, Lorraine's voice echoed across the terminal. She owes us, we're her parents. She owes us everything. A traveling businessman nearby shook his head. Sounds like they owe her an apology and about 15 years of therapy. By 8:10 a.m., the Bahamas flight was a distant contrail in the morning sky. Howard sat in the back of a police car. Lorraine was being escorted to another cruiser, still screaming about injustice. The church leaders huddled with law enforcement, providing statements about embezzlement. My phone buzzed with the automated confirmation. Monroe versus Monroe civil suit successfully filed, 8 a.m. I clicked through to check the filing. Fraud, identity theft, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, extortion. The damages requested matched exactly what they'd stolen over the years, plus legal fees, plus punitive damages for the decade of abuse. Kyle appeared at my elbow, looking shell-shocked. Mom and Dad are going to jail. Probably, I said, closing my laptop. At minimum, they're facing federal charges for identity theft and bank fraud, state charges for embezzlement, multiple counts of violating a protection order. What am I supposed to do? Whatever you want, I said. For the first time in your life, you can make choices without their manipulation. The terminal began returning to normal, travelers flowing around the remnants of our family drama. The Coral Reef Resort in the Bahamas would have an empty suite tonight, a $9,000 ghost of my parents' greed. Special Agent Torres approached one last time. Ms. Monroe, we'll need you to come to the Federal Building Monday for a full statement. I'll be there, I said, handing her a backup USB. This has everything, 10 years of evidence, all time-stamped and verified. She looked at the drive, then at me. You've been planning this for a while. No, I corrected. I've been documenting abuse for a while. They planned this themselves when they decided to escalate to federal crimes. The last sound I heard as I left Terminal B was the click of Lorraine's handcuffs as they adjusted them for transport. The same click as her fake nails on my wrist. The same click as the locks on the church safe she'd tried to rob. The same click as Howard's belt when I was 17 and refused to sign over my college fund. But this time, the click meant freedom. Mine. The federal building's glass doors reflected my face as I exited Monday afternoon. Final statement given. Evidence officially entered into record. 3 days had passed since the airport confrontation. Howard remained in custody, denied bail after threatening a witness, me, through a jailhouse phone call Kyle had wisely recorded. Lorraine had been released on bond, but with conditions: no contact with me, no access to church property, no leaving the state. The fraud charges were ironclad. First National Bank's investigation had uncovered 6 credit cards opened using my information. $43,000 in total debt I'd never known existed. The federal prosecutor called it one of the most documented cases of familial identity theft she'd ever seen. Grace Hollow had begun civil proceedings to recover their funds. The congregation had split, some still defending my parents, unable to reconcile the performers they knew with the criminals they were. Others came forward with their own stories of small manipulations, loans never repaid, pressure tactics disguised as fellowship. I sat in my car outside the federal building, holding the victim services packet they'd given me. Resources for counseling, support groups, legal aid continuation. Inside was also a check, the first restitution payment, seized from my parents' accounts. $4,000 of the $43,000 they owed me. My phone buzzed. Elise calling with an update. The criminal cases are solid, she said. Federal identity theft, wire fraud, extortion, state embezzlement, assault, violation of protection orders. Your parents are looking at serious time. How long? Howard's facing 5 to 7 years if convicted on all counts. Lorraine, 3 to 5. They might plea down, but they won't walk away from this. 5 to 7 years. When I was 17, Howard had locked me in my room for 5 days for refusing to sign a loan document. Now he'd be the one locked away. There's more, Elise continued. The church found additional discrepancies going back 7 years. They're amending their complaint, and 3 other families have come forward, saying your parents pressured them into loans that were never repaid. The house of cards hadn't just fallen, it had combusted. That evening, I met Kyle at a coffee shop downtown. He looked older somehow, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders curved with the weight of recognition. I found more, he said, sliding a folder across the table. In Dad's home office. Copies of your signature he'd been practicing. Documents with your name forged. Plans for more credit cards. I opened the folder. My signature, traced over and over in Howard's handwriting. Applications for credit lines at stores I'd never shopped at. A life insurance policy on me with them as beneficiaries. Why didn't you ever say anything? I asked. Kyle stared into his coffee. I was the golden child. As long as you were the target, I was safe. I'm sorry. Rachel, I'm so fucking sorry. What are you going to do now? Get therapy. Get clean from them. Try to be better. He pulled out his own folder. I'm documenting everything too now, learning from you. The coffee shop's door chimed. Margaret from the church entered, spotted us, and approached carefully. Rachel, I wanted to apologize, she said. We should have seen it. Should have protected you. You see it now, I replied. That's what matters. She handed me an envelope. The board voted, this is a formal apology from Grace Hollow and a check for the counseling the church should have provided years ago instead of enabling them. I didn't open it. Give it to the youth group. Make sure no other kids go through what I did. Tuesday morning, 8:45 a.m. 1 week exactly since the Bahamas flight departed without my parents. I stood in my apartment, packing the last box. The lease had 2 months left, but I was done with Cleveland. Northlake Dynamics had approved my transfer to the Seattle office. 3,000 miles felt like just enough distance. My phone rang. Officer Rodriguez. Thought you should know, she said. Your father just pled guilty to assault in violation of the protection order. 18 months minimum. He's trying to negotiate the federal charges, but it's not going well. And Lorraine, still insisting she's a victim. Her lawyers trying to claim emotional distress made her not responsible for her actions. I almost laughed. Emotional distress. After a decade of causing mine. The moving truck arrived at noon. As the movers loaded boxes, I did one final review of my files, now backed up in 5 locations, with copies held by my lawyer, the FBI, and a safety deposit box. 10 years of evidence that had finally found its purpose. The last item I packed was a photo from my college graduation. Howard and Lorraine flanking me, all smiles for the camera. Hours later, they'd demanded I sign over my signing bonus to them. I'd refused. That was the night I'd started the Monroe Archive folder. I kept the photo as evidence, proof that monsters could smile, that abuse could wear church clothes and speak in prayers, that sometimes the people who were supposed to protect you became the ones you needed protection from. My phone showed one final text from Lorraine, sent through a third party in violation of her bond. You'll regret this when we're gone. I screenshotted it, forwarded it to the prosecutor, and blocked the number. No, I wouldn't regret this. Regret was for choices you wished you could unmake. This wasn't a choice. It was survival. The moving truck pulled away at 2 p.m. I followed in my car, Cleveland shrinking in the rearview mirror. At the city limits. I pulled over and opened my laptop one last time. The Monroe Archive folder sat on the desktop. 10 years and 78 gigabytes of pain transformed into justice. I created a new folder, Seattle Fresh Start. Inside, I placed a single document. A victim impact statement I'd written for the sentencing hearing. Howard and Lorraine Monroe didn't just steal money. They stole trust, safety, and 25 years of my life. But they also taught me something valuable, the importance of documentation, boundaries, and the power of truth. They created their own destroyer by showing me exactly who they were. I kept the receipts. All of them. The laptop screen reflected my face. Bruise faded, eyes clear, chin raised. I closed the computer and drove west, toward mountains and ocean and a life where love didn't come with invoices. Behind me, in a federal holding cell and a house with a foreclosure notice, my parents were finally paying their own way. The cost, everything, the price of their greed, perfectly itemized, time-stamped, and submitted as evidence, justice, with receipts. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where are you listening from? Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts on standing up to family abuse. Your story matters too.